Wonderful. Welcome everyone to this webinar by the Renewables Grid Initiative together with our partners, whose logo you see displayed at the bottom. This is a webinar on the topic of nature networks. So we're going to be talking today about biodiversity, about security of supply, about local partnerships on the ground, restoration, and a kind of branching topic over the top of that, which gave the name to this webinar, is how green infrastructure, how the power grid can restore fragmented ecosystems. This is the first webinar in a series that we will be doing here at RGI. What does that mean? We will have, over the next months and over the next years, many webinars on 3 topics, and those topics are biodiversity and green corridors, bird protection around the power grid and energy infrastructure, and the third one is multifunctionality and circular economy. And without wanting to give a biased spin to this webinar already, I must say that this topic is one which is very close to my heart. I would even say it's my favorite within my job. I find it very exciting and it gives me a lot of motivation and hope. And I think that you'll really, really feel that today. This is an opportunity, I think, to find a really positive story. I think we all know the crisis situations that we operate within, climate change, the biodiversity crisis, but looking at infrastructure with a new lens and looking to try and find the opportunities that exist within existing infrastructure to really support biodiversity just by making some small changes. Well, small is a relative word, but by transforming the way that we look at energy infrastructure, we really have a chance to create new habitats, to connect ecosystems, and many, many other positive influences as well. The webinar will go for an hour and a half, and you will hear from 3 speakers who come from academia, who come from consultancies and industry as well, with a lot of experience in infrastructure management and specifically with integrated vegetation management. So I'll pass the word to them in just a second, but before I do, let me introduce myself first of all. I'm Liam Innes, I work for RGI, and I'm a manager for energy ecosystems. So, just before we get started, you will see, I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom already, but do rename yourself so that we see your name and your affiliation, as you see here. And when you're not speaking, it would be great if you can mute yourself. We will use video for the discussion part at the end, and we really want to see your faces. We want this to be a nice in-depth discussion, and please do bear in mind that there's a time limit, so when you're asking your questions, get to the point. And you know how to use the chat and the reactions function as well. Please feel free at any point to post your questions in the chat, and I will come back to them later then in the discussion point. So briefly before we begin, who is RGI? Some of you may be here for the first time and you won't be aware of the work that we do. So RGI, the Renewables Grid Initiative, is a collaboration between TSOs, transmission system operators, and NGOs, environmental NGOs, social NGOs across Europe. And we bring together these partners to the same table to try and realize an energy transition which works for people and nature, which is fair, which is sustainable, transparent, and thus can bring us to full decarbonization in line with the Paris Agreement. But not just that, we want to create new opportunities for people and nature along the way. And within that, as I said, infrastructure management, green corridor management is a key topic. What is that? What do we mean when we say vegetation management? This is something that all grid operators have to do. If you imagine you have the power lines going through, of course, you can't have really tall trees interfering with the power lines, because this could cause a fire, this could cause a spark out. And we need to, the vegetation needs to be managed in some ways. Now there's changes that can be done to make this a really sustainable and to create really sustainable practice and to create new practices along the way. This is something that we deal with at RGI a fair amount. We've done a discussion paper a couple of years back together with Ecofirst. We have a database full of best practices from across Europe. We have a good practice of the year award, which recognizes such practices as well. And actually the good practice of the year award is currently running. And we have a video that we've created as well on the topic.
Ahí estamos.
Okay, I've just been made aware that my presentation is in presentation mode. Sorry about that, but it's fine. I'm going to shut up in a second anyway. So my final slide is the agenda for today. So as you can see, this was the introduction, and then we'll move on to a speaker from Belgium, Jean-François Godeau, who is an R&D scientist from Ecofirst, and he was very involved in the integrated vegetation management program of ILIA on the ground in Belgium. So he will speak about the Belgian experience. Then we will move over to Spain and we will hear from Dr. Miguel Ferrer, who is a research professor at the biological station of Doñana in the south of Spain. He will present a study which was done looking at the potential of power lines to be stepping stones for biodiversity and really to connect ecosystems and to act as corridors. And then finally, we'll move to Miguel Wahl, who is a colleague from WestNetz and who is in charge of the international rollout of ecological corridor management in the whole of E.ON's grid area. Just for clarity as well, you'll hear us refer to ecological corridor management, you'll hear us refer to integrated vegetation management and green corridors. These are all the same idea, they're all the same thing. And so that's enough from me. I will now stop sharing my screen and give the word over to Jean-François, who will also share his presentation. And thank you very much.
Okay, can I share now? Yeah. So hi everybody, and thank you, Liam, for inviting me today. I will try to give a picture quickly of what we did during the live program, a live area RTE. And that's a challenge because there is a lot to say, but I would like to put the emphasis on today's topic, on the role of the electric network on ecosystems. So the LIFE project, it's probably some of you know already very well how it works. It's a European co-funding program, and this specific LIFE project, it happened during 6 years in Belgium and France with the transport system operators, ELIA in Belgium and RTE in France. So as Liam already shortly explained, the point is that we worked in the clear corridors in forests that are done for the power provisioning, and the main point of this project was to switch from a classical vegetation management strategy to an integrated vegetation management. So it's I will refer in many times to the IVM. Well, then this picture shows that this work of clearing the vegetation is a permanent work that has to be done each 5 to 10 years. The trees have to be cut for the protection of the wires, and then the forest is regrowing. And what we wanted to do is to cut off this cycle by restoring habitats that are properly managed and which are much more beneficial for the wildlife and for natural habitats. This picture is really shortly showing what means switching from vegetation management to integrated vegetation management. The main key point is to definitely reduce the intensity of human input and leave much more place for nature, which also plays roles of ecosystem services and with a better functional habitat and reducing dramatically the intensity of human input. A few numbers here that describe the LIFE project. This project lasted nearly 7 years with a global budget of 3.2 million euro. And our team worked in mainly in Belgium and in France on all together about 500 hectares, where we developed 7 types of actions, 7 types of habitat, let's say, were restored, and we had a lot of contact with different countries, about 18 countries in Europe. So as I said, it's pretty difficult to represent the 500 hectares here in a nutshell, but these maps are showing that in 2020 and further on, together with Elia, we are trying to assess how much these actions are were well settled and developed correctly. And as you can see with this little color dots, we mainly have green dots. That's really the sign of success, because as we can assess, in 71% of the sites that were evaluated in 2020, the action was successful, and even in 19% of the cases, the success was beyond expectations. We really didn't believe it could go so well, and assessing the species and the habitats definitely gave us a picture that it worked. But before coming into examples, I wanted to come back to the question that we're addressing today, because we talk about linear infrastructure. Then what are these linear infrastructure? It can be power lines, it can be roads, motorways, waterways, train railways, and of course, as you can guess, they have very different impact on the wildlife. Here today, I'm gonna talk only about the power lines, the right-of-ways of power lines in forest. And the first question, which is not so obvious, is do they act as a barrier or rather a facility for the wildlife? And I try to sum up here the results of a French study that was performed 10 years ago on mammals. And they in this study they considered 5 species of mammals: the roe deer, fox, hedgehog, pine marten, bank vole. And they studied through population genetics and also with tracking animals with GPS collars, and even with different type of behavioral observations, whether the forest corridor, as you can see on the picture there, if it acts as a barrier or rather as a true corridor. And the population genetic approach definitely shows that there is no effect, no barrier effect. As you can see, this gradient of colors shows different populations in terms of genetics, and you can see that there is no effect of this line, which is the main electric corridor in this part of the forest. And in these 4 cases, there is no effect that could be seen on the level of the population genetics. And as opposite example, there was a natural river, the river Sambre, and this river has an effect on population, on groups of population in terms of genetics. So no, there is no effect of barrier from the electric lines. And then I wanted also to emphasize that when we talk about forest, what are we talking about? Forest is definitely not only a collection of trees growing side by side. I took here an example of the so-called primeval forest of Białowieża in Poland, and when you zoom on the part of this forest, this is the very center of this forest that was never managed by human being. You can see that it's a real mosaic of different type of species, a different type of forest, and with also some natural glades, some swamps, which are forming a collection of different pattern in the forest. And the question, the hypothesis is that the power lines, when they are properly managed, it can play this role of an alternative to natural glades. And secondly, I wanted also to put the emphasis that when we talk about fragmented ecosystem, we can focus on habitat, we can focus on species. Of course, they are interdependent. Since for habitats, we can manage them in some way, we can restore them, increase their surface, their continuity. We can create new habitats like ponds, which act as stepping stones. And on the other side, or additionally, there is the species point of view. And the species, they of course are associated with habitats for hunting, for breeding, or for moving. I will only quote 3 examples of the result of the LifeElia project. And these 3 examples, the first is focusing on the habitat, the second on one species, and the third example, it's the case of the ponds, which are very particular type of habitats. In this first example, you can see here the different pictures showing the situation before there was any action. Actually, there were 2 types of actions. On one side, Elia had the necessity to widen the forest corridor with cutting 1 or 2 lines of trees on the side to widen the corridor for the protection of the line. So it was very narrow, shadowy, and mainly colonized by bracken. And you can see here the size of this common bracken, a very tall plant, and there was only few species of plants there. So during the LIFE project, what we did is that we cut this bracken, and we also had a strong action on the soil to destroy the roots of this bracken. And after that, we sown a mix of seeds that was harvested in a hay meadow, local hay meadow. And now it looks like that. It definitely changed a lot the aspect of this corridor. You see now that there is a huge diversity of flowers. There are some pictures of the flowers and species like bats that are now living there. So it's a few hectares of Natura 2000 habitat that now is developing there. And it's also managed in a very sustainable way because the management is performed by a farmer who is getting some money from the agro-environmental package of Europe. That makes it totally sustainable. And in addition, in this particular case, we also built a viewpoint that allow people to come there and see how this habitat is now evolving. The second example is focusing on one species, on one butterfly species called Marber fritillary. This is a species that was absent from Northern Europe 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And probably as an effect of global warming, this species moved pretty fast towards north, and it became one of the most common species in our monitored live sites within 2 or 3 years, and definitely connected with the forest habitats. This maps is showing how within a few years this species became very common in Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany, in the northern Europe. And what we hypothesize is that the life sites really play the role of corridors for the species to move. The two graphs here on the left show the number of data that are used for this map that I showed you. And if we focus only on the data from Belgium, you can see the proportions of red and green. The green part of the bars is the data coming from the live site, only from the live sites. And in 2019, the proportion was definitely that most of the data that I collected here were coming from these live sites. And then later, of course, because the species developed broadly in Belgium, this proportion decreased. So that's a hypothesis. We don't have like a protocol to measure or prove it, but that's definitely the effect that we think that happens. And as a last example, I was talking about the stepping stone effect. In some sites, we dug many ponds, like clusters of ponds, like you can see these blue dots in the corridor, and these ponds very quickly became habitat suitable for snakes, newts, or dragonflies. And we are now observing how much the diversity is developing there. So that's it about this short glance on the project. As a conclusion, I wanted to just emphasize that the Power Grid can represent an opportunity to manage better or to restore habitats and the population of species that they host. At the integrated vegetation management, it's mainly a question of changing practices. It can involve some investments, but not necessarily. And definitely, when you see on the long-term management, it can be also less expensive to manage the sites properly. And that's definitely on the side of the social responsibility of the TSO. The good points is that there is involvement of local owners, of farmers through agreements with the third parties for management. And then these areas that were sometimes considered as lost areas are not lost at all for the biodiversity if it's managed properly. And there is an new open areas for people to walk through, and I definitely believe that especially now in the changing climate, it contributes to the resilience of the forest. So thank you, and I hope that you appreciate this talk, and we am open for questions for later.
Thank you very much, Jean-François. That was a fantastic presentation, super interesting. And to everyone listening, in case you're wondering what's happening now in Belgium, this integrated vegetation management is continuing. These sites continue to be super biodiverse. And if I'm not wrong, Jean-François, I believe you have some more biological indicators coming out soon. Is that correct?
Yeah. And inviting you to have a look on the Ecofirst website. In the end of this year, we will have a full English wrapping up of the biological monitoring that we perform, and I guess it will be a good summing up of this live project.
Really nice. Thank you very much. You can find the links in the chat, everyone. So if you want to check out that practice, please head over there. And thanks again to you, Jeff. I will now pass the word to Dr. Miguel Ferrer from the Biological Station of Doñana. who will present the study that was done over in Spain last year, which looks into exactly the topic of this webinar on how power line infrastructure can act as stepping stones for ecosystems. The floor is yours, Miguel.
Okay, thank you. Let me see, let me try to, okay. Let's see. It is. Okay, I'm going to make a short talk about a small experiment we did some years ago when we were worried about how to overpass fragmentation, especially in a scenario of climate change with a lot of different living beings try to move, in this case in the North Hemisphere, generally try to move to the north, but they found barriers and fragmented habitat that make very difficult to follow the climate speed. So we tried to find some practical solutions, and we made a small exercise. This is a representation of the natural park and protected areas in Spain, different colors. So if we try to connect all of them, we have to do something like that. That is quite similar to this area that is representing transmission power line in Spain and the rest of Europe, selecting only to the highest transmission line, the most common one. So we start to think how we are able to make, to use the transmission line as a corridor for the living beings, especially small animals that are unable to move better with the high speed that we need to do right now due to climate change. So what we did was to work to make a short and a small experiment in 200 kilowatt power line, transmission power line. As you know very well, typical towers are placed 200, 300 meters from each other. And the base, that is the most interesting thing for us in this experiment, is around 100 meters, square meters. Usually it's 10 per 10 meters. Obviously, this differs depending on the particular design of the line, but generally speaking, we can assume more or less 100 square meters under the base of each tower of the power lines. That means that we have more or less 100 million of square meters in the European Union on the base of this tower. So if we were able to find some way to connect them and use them as stepstone for some small animals, especially, perhaps we can find some practical solution or practical solution for this problem. What we did was select 2 power lines in the south of Spain and make some experiment. We managed the base of the tower. Obviously, we use some of other without any management as a control tower. We include some area without any tower, just as a control too. And we modified the selected pylon for the experiment, mainly using native species. We make plantation of native species in order to avoid any additional cost of water or whatever. So we use, and for the reason, obviously, we are looking for some plant that have high level of interaction with pollinator or other invertebrates in the area. So we selected plants on the tower, at the base of the tower, and we designed some specific shelter for thinking especially about small mammal and invertebrates too, and surround with fence to avoid the plant predation during the first years. And we start to make a high intensive sample in control tower, in control areas, in modified tower, try to see if there are any difference in the invertebrate community, small mammal community, and even birds. We are interested also to see if birds they feel attracted or not by this new plant in the base of the tower. So we make, we were sampling change in small mammal, I would say, before, and also in birds. And the result, it was something like that. And you can see on the left side of the slide is the number of individuals we trap in control modified towers. In the right column, you can see the species richness. So what we found was that during 4 years of the experiment, the increase in the number of individuals as well as the species richness in all the study group increased significantly a lot. And they did in the first year, keeping more or less at the same level during the rest of the year of the experiment. And still today, 10 years later, is in the same situation. This is interesting to mention, to point out that the only action was done in the first year. We never have to manipulate the base again, and we don't have to waste more money than in the first year. So whatever the effect was some kind of permanent, and it's pretty different between modified and controlled tower. As a result, we were able to increase a lot all the communities we study. And even if we don't have enough time and funds to study in detail how they move from one power to the other, and making analysis with the data we are able to collect, our conclusion, at least provisional conclusion, is that they are able to move a higher speed than the climate change is moving right now from one tower to the other. So it seems at least a very interesting result that deserve more studies, because perhaps could be a potential partial solution, at least for some living being, for that facilitate that they are able to move and overcome barriers and fragmented habitat. The cost of the implementation was very cheap, less than 500 euros per tower. And we have to keep in mind that we don't need to make this modification all along the pole line. We have to select only these areas that are necessary to overcome fragmentation and barriers. So it seems to me, at least, that it's a very interesting topic that deserves more research, because perhaps we can use the power lines as a corridor, at least for some group of species, including the small mammal, invertebrates, and perhaps bears too. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for that really insightful presentation. You can all see the link to the study in the chat just down here, and I would really encourage you to read it. It's a fascinating read, and it's the thing that really struck me is that it's simple measures that you took. You know, it's planting some trees, building some rock piles, protecting them a little bit. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that there was watering done for the first 4 months or so. And after this 4-month period, there was no more care. The plants took roots and they survived. And for the next 4 years, the level of biodiversity and variety of biodiversity remained at a constant. So it's kind of one action, which then has long-term effects. Maybe you can say a couple more words on that.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I think that this, as you can imagine, we had a limited time for this study and a limited funds, and we did what we can do that in this period. But of course, at the end of the experiment, we had more questions than answer. For instance, seems for me that potentially the use of some pound of water could help a lot amphibians that are suffering with the climate change, especially in the south of Europe. And potentially we can attract the species we want, selecting the right shelters, the right plants, or whatever, or including water. So for me, it seems to have a wide variety of possibilities for different species that must be explored. And personally, I want to have the opportunity to pick some emitters or some kind of mark and to study in more detail how high is the speed they're able to move from one tower to the other. Just to respond to the question if there are some possibilities to use this system as a solution for the climate change speed.
Yeah, fabulous. I mean, it's creating new habitats. It's drawing individuals from nearby ecosystems and then giving them chance to breed, to feed, to survive. So it's a really fantastic and very palpable example. Just as well for context, of course, this was done in Spain. So this was in partnership and funded and supported by Red Eléctrica de España, the TSO over in Spain. And later on as well, we'll speak by some other practices over in Spain, which are really leading in this regard. So good to see so much coming from the Iberian Peninsula.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel. If you have any more questions, Miguel will be around for the discussion at the end. And now we pass the word to Michael Wahl, a colleague from WestNetz, which is a DSO in Germany, and Michael is responsible for ecological corridor management in the whole of E.ON's grid area. So WestNetz is part of E.ON, and yeah, you'll hear from him now. It's a great work, and we're looking forward to hearing from you, Michael. So the word is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I look for my you can see my screen.
It's just loading, but it's looking. Yes, we see it. We see your presentation well.
Okay. Hello, everyone. First, sorry for my bad English. It is how it is. But you can. I hope you can understand me. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Wahl from Germany. I've been working at RWE WestNetz for 35 years. And since 18 years, I'm head of the department overhead line service 110 kV. And I have been working for, I think, 30 years on ecological corridor management under high voltage lines. I'm, so to speak, alongside my colleague Dirk Uter from Embryon, TSO, who unfortunately died, I think, 5 years ago. I'm so sorry. I'm the developer of ECM, I think, in Germany. I always like to say that ECM is my passion, ECM is my baby. I like it very much. And so for about 2 years, I have been chosen by E.ON board, Leo Birnbaum, to manage the rollout of the ECM in all E.ON companies all over Europe, which makes me very proud. You know, it's my baby. But first, this project was controversial, discussed in our E.ON group. The installation of ECM is not easy, and of course, is a struggle again. But the E.ON board, Dr. Leo Birnbaum and Thomas König, is completely convinced of this topic, and I'm very happy today that I can present this great project in the RGI seminar today. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your attention. We started with the first slide, a successful story after 13 years. You see on the right side, this our COO, Thomas König, my colleague, and my. E.ON has recognized the potential of ECM and started to make it happen across the company. I had the opportunity, our E.ON CEO, you see it here, Thomas König, in a line corridor near Essen, to convince of ECM. And also, 2 months later, our CEO, Leo Birnbaum, at a meeting of the great E.ON campaign with Reinhold Messner on the Pitztal Glacier in Austria. All they say ECM is how we contribute secure ecosystems. This is the rule of E.ON in the future. Why are we doing ECM? First, it's our profession to secure our network operation is our priority. But we also, with ECM, have to change to support diversity in all our grid areas, live up to social commitments, ensure our assets are ready for the future. The summer and the storms are heavy in the future, will be heavy in the future, and deliver the another point. We deliver E.ON sustainable strategy. E.ON had the ambition targets themselves, and we have to deliver this targets. That's a slide. We not to speak. This is the difference between conventional corridor management in the past and the ecological corridor management in the future, but not in the future for WestNetz. We have it 20 years, and this is between we see we have in the corridor ecological corridor ECM biodiversity mapping. We needed a maintenance planning. We have a high measurability, and we had a high maintenance frequency. What's not so easy for the operation units because you have more times in the areas, and that's a little bit problem. And this is an expensive topic, but we need it for ECM. We need a good monitoring and monitoring program to build a good corridor management. And the next slide is how did it begin? Looking from the beginning, we started in 1992 in WestNetz, WE in the past. Today, our status in today, we have 6,700 hectares vegetation areas, e.g. forest or forest or other vegetation areas. If 95% are biologically mapped and plotted, 19 ECM projects in West Germany, and Brooks 1,200 ECM plants in WestNetz. Our ECM mindset, we need an ECM mindset, the ECM basic rule, 4 dots, 4 points, displays fast-growing trees and promotes low-growing trees and bushes. After 5 and 10 years, a closed stock of low-growing species of trees and bushes has developed. And university said, and write it down, we have 5 times more biodiversity in our corridors. And the results, interviews with stakeholders, shows that this positive, very positive, and we minimize the public relevant conflicts potentials. Is only a good example for a developed ECM. In this case study, I show it from the pylon. In the past, it was very old trees, and you see it in the side. But now we had, I think it was near 20 years of operation in this area, and we have slow-growing trees and bushes and the whole and open spaces, meadows. I think it is high biodiversity plants. Also 20 years ago, we started in 2000. And that's our big targets of E.ON. Leo Birnbaum said we will turn 17,000 hectares along along the 30,000 kilometers of high voltage power lines into biotopes and habitats by the end of decade in 2029. We will invest 30 million euros, and this is our start. And in the next 10 years, we have finished, and we will create valuable biotopes on 70,000 hectares. And the next slides, you saw our baselining, our study. We have how high voltage lines in Sweden, in Germany, in Czech, in Hungary, in Romania, in Turkey, and in Poland, but it's not 100 kV lines or low Menge of Leitungen. We see we want to learn from each other, and we build an active ECM community. And we have talks and meetings all 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and physical meetings or meetings over Teams. It is very important for successful rollout. The ECM community, that's key for the successful ECM story in E.ON. And we need all experts from all DSO in Germany or in Europe, and you see the countries on the slide. And there are the numbers of the hectares which ECM manage or not ECM manage. You have a big number of hectares in Sweden. We have a big number of hectares by Avacon in Germany, and so what. And this, I show you this slide, the ECM managed areas in some 8,400 hectares, 7,000 hectares in WestNetz, and in the other DSO a little bit. Sweden, I think 300 hectares is a big task for us. The Swedish forest managed with ECM, but we have a digital solution in Sweden, and we roll it out over all countries in Europe. We need to learn from each other, and yes, this is a story. And the rollout map is clear for us, and now we started in the project. And now I show you the last slide. It's for me, it's a very nice slide to finish ECM in E.ON, a successful story. Why? We have the opportunity to make a valuable input to the protection of nature and species in our corridors. Yes, our corridors had to be maintained by us. I speak now for the DSO or TSO. So let's go the right path together. It's my slogan, and I think it is right. So, and we started yet in the E.ON world, and thank you very much for your attention. And if it a question, I'm here, and Liam supported me. I think so, and I think I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that wonderful presentation. It's really great to hear from you. I think your passion and your energy for the topic is really clear, and I find it extremely inspiring. I think this is what I meant at the start when to talk about how, you know, ECM can be a real. Oh, actually, Michael, you can stop sharing your screen. We're looking at your.
Yes.
Yeah. I think this is what I mean when we say that ECM can be a beacon of light. I mean, for all the other biodiversity nerds in the room, to see how these changes can make such a difference. And you said it yourself, there's 5 times more biodiversity in the grid corridors than the surrounding forest. These numbers are huge, and they're not just demonstrated by one project, they're replicated in every pilot project, every study that we see. So yeah, congratulations to you for carrying this work forward. It's really clear that you're leaving a great legacy. Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. And Michael will also be here for the discussion, of course. I see some questions coming in, so we'll soon move over to the discussion. But before we do that, I just wanted to also highlight, I mean, of course, for the purpose of this webinar, we pulled out kind of 3 of the really good examples of green corridors of integrated vegetation management in Europe that we know. But of course, there's many innovative approaches to vegetation management, you know. Lots of the grid operators that we work with go to extremes to take measures to really go beyond the average environmental impact assessments, actually to create new habitats, to restore existing habitats, to reduce the actions that they take and move more towards natural solutions. To give some examples, on the ground in Portugal, REN, the TSO, works together with universities and civil society organizations. They've created a chair of biodiversity at the University of Lisbon, which really examines and studies this thing in details. Also in Iberia, Red Eléctrica de España has run many different projects as well, as the study described by Miguel. They did a study with the Autonomous University of Barcelona, which looked at a similar topic, you know, the potential of these grids to be reservoirs of biodiversity. They developed a unique evaluation and monitoring scheme to kind of really follow the progress of these microhabitats. And just some of the figures that came out of this study are fabulous. They found an almost 400% increase in butterfly presence and diversity in open habitats. There's also different ways of managing vegetation, not using machinery. You know, this was present in the Ilia Life project, working with highland cattle, so big cows, to manage the vegetation. In Spain, they work with shepherds to use sheep to manage the vegetation, and these kind of partnerships as well are really exciting. This is local partnerships working with farmers on the ground, benefits for local people, but also in terms of vegetation management, it's extremely exciting. I could say the same in France, in Spain, in Germany. Some of the German TSOs are really leading the way. Also, some of the NGO members of RGI, where NABU is a member, and they, down in Baden-Württemberg, run a dialogue forum with grid operators and with civil society to really talk about these issues and to look for joint solutions. And I think you can see my passion. I could go all about this all day, but the message that I want to leave behind is that there's a lot of really good things. There's a lot of inspiration to be found when you really look for them. And what we hope to do then with this series of webinars and social media activities is really bring them to light. You'll be getting emails from me, and if you follow us on social media, which I encourage you to do, you'll see some of the best practices that we share. And our mandate at RGI is to select best practices, to look for the good work, and to share it with a view to multiplying this across Europe. Okay, that's enough from me for now. There's a lot of questions come in, and I would, first of all, I see that so let me look at the questions. I see we have a lot that's come in. I also see Francisco Moreira has raised his hand. Francisco, I'll give you the word in just a second, but there's some questions that came in earlier that I'd like to address. And for that, I see Luca Moyana from Tiana has asked a question about the influence of green corridors and especially of ponds on attracting birds to areas, and if there's any negative impacts which could come out of this. Luca, feel free to unmute yourself and to ask this question directly.
Hi, hello everyone, and very interesting presentation I've seen. No, the question was about the effects on birds, because we were thinking of some kind of management of this type of action for conservation, but we have a concern that the presence of wetlands can attract more birds and then increase the risk of collisions. If you have any data on that or any consideration on the project you developed, it'd be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. Open question to any of our speakers. Have you had experience with birds being attracted and how to mitigate risk here?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Miguel, would you like to start, and then we'll go to Jeff?
Please go.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Obviously, we're interested to help develop a movement of biodiversity, to increase the number of accidents. Fortunately, in our case, we were working with transmission line that is by far less dangerous than distribution lines, as you probably know, because in distribution line, the problem is electrocution that is affecting very heavily, especially species like raptors that are endangered species. But anyway, fortunately, during the last more than 40 years, we were working on a system to mitigate collisions and electrocution on power lines, not only here in Spain, but as you know, all over the world. And nowadays, we have very good device to avoid this kind of problem or to decrease to a low level. So my suggestion, every time we are thinking about the system to attract wildlife or to use power line as corridor, we have to keep in mind that we have to do that only in safe power lines, or to use the necessary device to avoid any problem, at least in a large magnitude. Anyway, it's a very interesting question, and we have to keep in mind that the power line can be used, but must be safe.
Thank you, Miguel. Over to you, Jean-François.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's a question that we often got. What I can say is that there are 2 points of view. There is the collisions, which are killing rather small birds passing from one side of forest to the other, for example. And there are the main electrocution events with the largest birds. What I can say is that in all the along all the site, all the ponds that we created, there was never any reports of such an event. So collision, they are happening, they are still happening. I don't think so that that we can see any increased effect, but definitely we can see black storks, herons coming to the ponds, and it looks that they got used to the place, that they know where it's dangerous to fly and not. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't seem that there is any negative effects or like attracting and creating ecological traps like that. So, but it's not, of course, like a fully scientific survey, but this is from our observations from colleagues which are often in the field.
Thank you very much, Jean-François. Maybe if I can just build on what the two speakers said, it's certainly a very important point. And of course, there are the opportunity for risk interactions between birds and power lines. But by building up these ecosystems, it's creating new spaces where these birds can survive. So where before there was nothing, or there was very depleted food space, breeding spaces, there is now something. Of course, that comes with a risk, but this risk can be mitigated. There's many types of bird markers on the market which can be installed on the power lines. As Miguel said, the pylons can be changed, they can be adapted, they can be insulated to prevent electrocution on all of the live parts of the wire. Nest boxes can be installed so that should any of the species, mainly storks or raptors, choose to nest, they can do this on a stable surface and not where the power lines are live. And as Jean-François said, maybe the birds that then come and make this their new habitat, they get used to the most dangerous areas. And so the risk is over time less. That said, it's an area which needs a lot more research. Always more research is welcome and more monitoring. And indeed, we have a few projects going to look more into this. And there's also interesting techniques and new bird diverter methods that are coming in, for example, to shine UV lights on the power lines at nighttime. This is an American system, but yeah, the problem is known, and we hope to continue working on this in the future. There's many more questions. I'll pass the word straight away to Francisco Moreira because he has his hand up, and I would also invite everyone in the public, if you would like, to turn your cameras on, and then as well, while we're speaking, we can see each other. Francisco, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Thank you for the presenters. Very interesting presentations today. My name is Francisco, and I am the shareholder of this research group sponsored by the Portuguese TSO that is based on the University of Porto, not Lisbon, Porto. No worries. Two short comments. The first is exactly what we are just discussing. I think that, I have seen several initiatives from TSOs, in particular, trying to apply for conservation projects and having this typical reply from the nature conservation authorities saying that you will do that and then you attract birds and you increase mortality, and that's a problem. And as Miguel said, and Leon, we can mitigate it, but I guess that the net benefits will be positive, and so we should acknowledge that there is some cost, but that it is likely that the benefits will be positive. But of course, it's a challenge to scientists to try to present evidence that that's the case. My second and last comment relates to pylons, and based on what Miguel was showing, that we do have a challenge, and the challenge is the pylon design, because and many of you probably know better than I that there is technological development. That could be a trend for pylon design to be changed to like a tubular structure, which will likely have a much smaller area at base and lacks that lattice structure that can be beneficial for biodiversity. And so in the future, we could even think of pylons for biodiversity that would have changes that could potentiate the effects that we are aiming with the type of initiatives that we were addressed here. So I think pylon design is something to be explored in terms of the potential biodiversity benefits. And that's it. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for your perspective. If there's any comments from any speakers on, yeah, Miguel, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's interesting for me. Well, I fully agree with Francisco, and only two minor comments. The first one is I'm starting for the end. I'm completely sure that we have to make more for in design and the future power lines and the power poles, especially talking about distribution lines, but perhaps also talking about power lines of transmission lines. But nowadays we have 100 millions of the old design located in Europe. For me, it's a challenge to find if we are able to modify slightly and to take some advantage about the distribution of biodiversity. So even if we are going to change in the future, we are going to live with 100 millions of them still for a long time. So the first comment is about the potential risk if we attract more birds to power lines that are full of life. Well, the first things I have to say is not very I don't know why, but it's difficult to explain, but there are no relationship between density of bird and accidents. And sure that you start to be confused about that, but think from other point of view. There are no relationship between density of traffic, of car in the highways, and the number of accidents. In fact, dangerous areas in roads are usually outside the highways. The same happens with electrocution and with collision. Depend more on certain factors, much more than density of bird. Density of bird, from a mathematical point of view, is a covariate in the model. It's not a explanatory variable. So it's no, even if it seems counterintuitive, there are no linear relationship between density and accidents. This is the first thing. The second thing is that, fortunately, nowadays we have a lot of devices have been proven satisfactory to decrease the mortality. For instance, the last paper we published 1 year ago, we were able to achieve 70.2 decrease in collisions. Still, there are some opportunities to improve this kind of device. This is not the end, but right now we are able to decrease by more than 70% the risk of collision. That is good to know. And we obtain even better result with electrocutions. Fortunately, we were able to reduce 82% electrocution in the south of Spain, retrofitting the power lines in the proper way. So fully agree that we have to use power lines and transmission lines if we are clever enough to find how to use them to avoid fragmentation. But again, we have to be sure that these power lines are safe. And nowadays we can do that.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I have to agree with what you said. I think it's some really important points. And the point that you made about the relationship between bird density and power lines, I think is really important. I mean, this means all the more that monitoring and data are vital to find these high risk power lines and to adjust them, to fix them. There's many interesting projects to monitor these. You know, TSOs tend to have their own monitoring going on, but there's certain approaches that can be taken to really find where the risk is. And thank you to Mathieu. I just saw posted in the chat a link to the Belgian case where sensitivity mapping was used to find, to really overlap all of these maps of bird presence, bird breeding, migrations, and power lines to find the high risk areas. And once these high risk power lines have been found, you know, there are things that can be done. Of course, it's expensive. Of course, there's hundreds of thousands, millions that need to be changed. But this is a welcome challenge, I think. If you'll allow me as well to just plug a project that's coming up very briefly. RGI is part of a consortium that will start this year. It's a new LIFE project based between Belgium, France, and Portugal. And we will work with civil society, grid operators to tackle electrocution, collision, and disturbance of breeding birds. And not only that, but we will underline the importance of data sharing and openness. So there'll be many monitoring, many testings, and all of this will be done in an open data way. So the project can be followed over the next 6 years. It's called Safe Lines for Birds. And yeah, soon I will be communicating more broadly, but this is another approach, as I said, funded by the European Commission's LIFE program to really find these high risk areas and to tackle them. Wonderful. We've spent a lot of time talking about birds, and there's a couple of questions that have come in about vegetation. There is one by Oscar. I would like to give the word to Oscar, and then I would pass to Rupert as well from Cape Town. So first of all, Oscar, you had a question in here about invasive species. You're very welcome to unmute yourself, turn your camera on and ask.
Good day, everyone. Hi there, my name is Oscar. I'm from South Africa. I'm not sure if you can see my camera there.
We can, hi.
All right. So yeah, I was just thinking under the power lines, you say clearing would happen between 5 and 10 years. So I'm thinking, so that's a disturbed area. So it's likely that you will have the species that are that are like late successional species in that area, not liking that place. So don't you have a lot of invasive species that are not typical of this area, and that might be a problem? Because I had in one of the in one of the topics saying, sorry about that, saying that the corridors are more biodiverse than the nearby forests. That's possible because most of the species that you get there are not from the area, and isn't that a problem actually? Yeah, I think that's just what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Oscar. So a question on the diversity and if the plants in these power corridors are native species or invasive species. I guess this goes to Jean-François and Michael. Do you have any answers here?
Well, I can begin. And yeah, that's really a question that we try to tackle in the LIFE project. We had a specific action on invasive species, and fortunately, I should say that we didn't have too many cases with invasive species. And what I wanted to say as first is that the biggest problem is when the management is not suitable. It's not that people don't care about the presence of invasive species, and then the management, the vegetation management action can spread, definitely increase the spreading of these plants. So the first action I want to say is to inform and have to include this dimension in the management and plans, to maybe not destroy or remove them, but just not to help them to grow. That's first. We did have some case where we could replace a site invaded by invasive species by another habitat, and the management of this new habitat helped to keep these species to prevent them from regrowing. It was a very particular case, but in some cases it worked. We had the case of Prunus serratina, which is a tree which can become very invasive suddenly. And when we replaced the sites, we cut and destroy the root of this plant, and then we replace the site by a hay meadow. The fact of harvesting the hay each year prevent them from regrowing, and that worked. But I should say that in some cases, if not most of the case, the problem is that the invasive species are in the corridor and outside of the corridor. So there is no action that we can really have efficiently at the scale of the corridor only. And that's an issue.
Thank you. You've answered my question. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Jean-François. Michel, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I agree, Jean-François. Yes, this topic of invasion species. Yes, if you cut the trees and you bring light into the corridors, the invasion species are growing. Yes, it's not a topic from ECM, or not a topic from. I think it is not a topic from ECM or the maintenance. It is a topic from our climate too, and I don't know. But we remove today. We remove the invasive species, but it is difficult. We cannot remove it completely. There are, but it is not a great sum of invasive species. Yes, there are, and I have not a good plan to remove them totally in a little part of our corridors. They are, and there was in the past too, and I have no plan to remove them all. But it is correct, the invasive species growing.
Thank you, Michel. Yeah, I think it's an important point that you both made. I mean, this is a really big problem which kind of is beyond the scope of ECM, of IVM. It needs to be tackled on every level, really, to tackle invasive species. And Oscar, another question that you asked about whether the native species are planted. I'm aware of some projects to, for example, in fire-prone areas, replace fast-growing fire-prone vegetation with, for example, native oak species, which are much more slow-growing, much less susceptible than to fires. There was another question on the topic which came in from Rupert from Cape Town, Rupert Koopman. If you would like to show yourself and unmute yourself, you can go ahead. Hi there.
How's it, Liam? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I've worked in the space in South Africa, conservation in the Western Cape for a while, and now nationally. And our situation is slightly different in that we have a lot of threatened species and habitats which are only found under the power line corridors. Those are the less developed corridors through agricultural landscapes. And as a result, the management kind of impacts are different because you can't mow them up and move them elsewhere, and there's nowhere else to put them because the habitat doesn't exist. So I wanted to check with the panel, have you had experiences like that with threatened habitats and species under your power lines? And B, most of our ecosystems are fire driven. So when you're talking about pylon design, that's also really interesting to us because currently why they mow and plow under power lines is because of the risk of fire and arcing of the current. And if there's any experience from that point of view in terms of fire management.
Thank you very much, Rupert. So 2 questions then on rare species and how to manage them, and then also on fire management. Would anyone like to take the floor?
Can be first for the Spanish guys, no? What do you think? I mean, I have nothing to say really specifically about the fire management in Belgium, fortunately, so far.
I see Francisco also raised his hand, so maybe we can get a Portuguese
okay,
perspective.
Yeah. I think Francisco can have a lot to say.
Unfortunately, we know a lot about fires. But yes, commenting on Rupert's, the problem is that the fire hazard has been tackled as traditional vegetation management. But you are absolutely right. It's a kind of a compromise that has to be taken when you are working in the context where fire is a major issue. You might not be able to have the liberty to take the best decisions for biodiversity because of associated increased fire risks. And yes, it is definitely something that has to be taken into account. And in fact, it's also one of the reasons why tree plantations are not necessarily the best solution. So in the case of Portugal, as you mentioned, if there are threatened grasslands or other types of vegetation that has lower fire hazard, that can take higher priority, even if there is a very valuable forest habitat that could be promoted. So that would be my general comment on the issues. It's certainly a crucial problem, at least in Portugal and Spain in the European context. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. Any more comments from others on the topic of fire, or indeed on rare species and their protection?
Well, I can just simply add that in Europe, we talk a lot in terms of Natura 2000, and so we mapped in the end of the LIFE project the presence, the surfaces of specific habitats like thermophilous grasslands or hay meadow, which are valuable and which host some rare species. So definitely, yeah, there are these kind of cases. I don't know what to add specifically on this, but we do have some examples of populations which are present or growing of rare species.
Thank you, Jean-François. We eagerly await your report that will be published soon on the biological indicators, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Rupert. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think just one last thing on that is when the species are not congruent with the kind of management that you have. So for example, if it was a grassland, it's easy because you can mow it and so forth. But when you start thinking about, and yeah, I'm talking to the Mediterraneans because we got the same kind of ecosystem, Mediterranean shrubland, shrubs that don't respond well to mowing and so forth. So yeah, but I like to pick it up with, it sounds like we need a work group.
Sure, we'll be very happy to be in touch, and Francisco, Rupert, maybe we can share contacts and really build on this. Thanks very much. One more question that came in I'd really like to look at was on the social implications of this in terms of acceptance, but also how the public can interact with grid corridors through ECM and IVM. This question came in from Alexander. If you're here, Alexander, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. He's on the train. Aha, okay, he's on the train, and therefore he might not be able to do that. But thank you for the question. I think it's a really important one. And maybe that's something that we can pick up now. If I can take a first comment on this, that we've learned from the Belgian project, also it's something that Michael said, that once you change the management of the land underneath power lines, once you show the public that you are interested in promoting biodiverse ecosystems in the land that you help to manage, it has very positive implications for public perception of energy infrastructure. You know, it shows that you're going beyond your mandate as a infrastructure management of delivering power, but also in looking for additional benefits. Of course, in terms of biodiversity, but also in terms of rights of land to new stakeholders. And this in the Belgian project, I mean, Jean-François can say more, but was open to, for example, hunters, beekeepers, public people, so families who can then walk in the corridors and see these really biodiverse areas. Michael, you also commented and said that conversations on the ground with people show how well this has gone down and helps to really build an atmosphere of trust between people. Yeah, that's from my perspective. If any of the speakers would like to add to the social implications of these practices, please go ahead.
Maybe I can add a few words, but you already, I think, summed up what I think. That, yeah, involving all the different owners in managing these areas is really giving back some sense, because a lot of people, they felt that they couldn't use anymore some part of their on their own land. It can be private or public owner. They just feel like, in the example of forest, they cannot grow forest at this place. And then when you show that you can really do something there, and it can be like a shooting area for hunters, it can be a place for leaving the nature developing, it can be very different options, but still you give back some meaning in this place, some utility. So that's really something that we had a lot of discussion during the LIFE project with people, and when you show the light that suddenly you can grow, you know, the native small apples, the wild apples, which are only used for wild animals. But then when people see that, and then they see the flowers, and then the pollinators going there, it really changed their vision on this part of their parcel that they didn't use before. And that's something very positive. And even the people working at the TSOs, the line, the responsible of the line, when they see that that it gives back some sense in this area, they were just proud that that the contribution of the landscape is not only the bad one with cutting the trees, and that's something that we were really happy to see sometimes.
Thank you very much, Jean-François. If there's any other comments, feel free to go ahead on that point. Otherwise, I would say we have time for one more question. If anyone feels moved, they didn't get the chance to speak yet, would like to jump in, please go ahead. And if not, then I have another opportunity to plug something which may be exciting for some of you. I'll kind of sum up and roll this into one. As I said, with this work that we're doing here at RGI, what we're really doing is looking for the best of the best across Europe, innovative approaches, and bringing them to the light and spreading them as much as we can in the hope that they'll be replicated. We do this with our communications work. We do this with projects that we have between specific partners. And again, this is our general operating approach anyway. And one project that we have which seeks to really promote the best practices from across Europe is our Good Practice of the Year Award. This is a yearly award that we run with 3 categories: in technological innovation, in communication and engagement, and most relevant for this webinar, environmental protection. And we receive and we accept applications from all sorts of different organizations. Indeed, some of them have been are represented here. Indeed, Ecofirst actually won the Environmental Protection Award in 2014. And the award is now running. So the 2022 version of the award is underway. We're receiving submissions until the end of next week, the 17th of June. So if you felt inspired by this webinar, if you're aware of some practices from anywhere in the world, of course, Europe is where we operate, but we had recently a winner from Jordan and also from the US. If you know any practices which deserve recognition on a big stage, which we should celebrate and which we may not be aware of, please let them know about this Good Practice of the Year Award. Please apply yourself if you think that, that you would like to be involved. We have a brochure that will be released, and we will promote this throughout the year. So that's it. That's my final plug. And it's been a fantastic webinar with you all. Really, thank you for showing as much excitement for this this topic as it deserves. And as I said, we will continue this series on social media and in webinars over the next months and years. And we hope to build really a community of best practices for biodiversity, for birds, circular economy towards an energy transition, which works for people and nature. It's been fantastic. Thank you to my fantastic speakers. Really, it was so insightful to hear from you. Thank you to the audience for your involvement, and we look forward to welcoming you next time.